What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 48. My name is Victor Vasquez. Thank you so much for coming back and listening. On this week's episode, we're going to be covering the new Sony film, Gran Turismo. That's right. Most of you might think that, Gran Turismo, the racing game on PlayStation. But this film is actually not about the game itself. It's actually about the true story of one Jann Mardenborough. Jann was a man from the UK who loved to play Gran Turismo as a kid. And he basically grew up playing it, that he actually got an opportunity to compete in a Gran Turismo Academy competition. He ended up winning and then actually getting a chance to drive real race cars. And he basically started driving with other professional athletes. And again, he loved it so much, he wanted to do it as a kid, that it basically opened the door for him to actually become a professional athlete and race for a living. And so that's what the film is about. It's basically the true story of what Jann Mardenborough went through to become a race car driver. Basically playing a game, and that game ended up opening the opportunity for him to actually drive and compete with other professional athletes. So really excited when I heard about that they were going to basically make a true story about that and explain how this is real. This is actually real. Some guy played a video game and got an opportunity to do what he loved, which is race cars. So that leads me into some of the initial questions and thoughts I had before watching the movie. So let's go ahead and segue into that first segment. My first question about Gran Turismo is, how are they going to keep the story grounded and true to what Jann actually experienced in his real life? What I mean by that is, we have a lot of biopics. We have a lot of true stories or based on a true story. There's always going to be little exaggerations here and there. Things to make the story a lot more interesting. So my question is what I brought up before, is how can they keep this very true to Jann's story? Now, I know there's got to be some type of exaggeration or some type of a way to make the story very much flow in the style of a movie, right? First act, second act, third act. But I would just hope that in this case, for the director, Neil Blomkamp, I would hope that he would have, a good vision as to, putting in some details here and there, but hopefully throughout the entire story, we're actually seeing what Jann went through. And so, again, I know that there's going to be some exaggeration. I know that there's going to be certain aspects where, there's going to be, details that, might not have been true as well. But I would hope that they can keep it very grounded so that it shows hey, this is actually what he went through. Yes, this detail may have been a little bit over exaggerated, but everything else is pretty spot on. And so that's my only hope, is just keep the story very grounded and real to what Jann actually went through. My second question is, how would the racing scenes compare to other films that we have seen in the past, and how would it differentiate itself? Some movies that we have in regards to racing scenes come, from Ford versus Ferrari, or we have Fast and the Furious. We have Rush, there's another film. There's a lot of different films that even have, cool car chase scenes. And each one does something very unique or tries to change it up when it comes to different types of action sequences when it comes to cars. So how would Gran Turismo try to differentiate that, right? How could they add their own little spin to it to make it unique in regards to this film? That's, again, one thing that I'm really looking forward to. Is just, again, I always kind of think of different types of scenes. Again, Ford versus Ferrari had some really good ones. One that comes to mind to me is the Batman had a cool car chase scene with the Batmobile, and they were able to add their own spin by mounting cameras on the side of their cars, and it just made it look very real, like if you were in the car with them. Really looking forward to how they're able to just make something very unique in regards to the camera shots and the things that they're able to pull off for racing scenes overall in this film. All right, now that I've actually had a chance to watch this movie, let's go ahead and jump into some of my overall thoughts about Gran Turismo. Overall, I thought the movie was an awesome and fun time. I got to check it out in a little sneak preview before it actually released to the public, and I was very surprised at how it came out. I had low expectations before I went to go watch the movie. Again, I was just very curious about this story and how Jann Mardenborough actually got to become a professional athlete. So again, I wanted to give it a shot. And again, I thought it did really well. They had their own specific take on racing in this film. And again, the overall story was really cool because, again, you could feel okay, this has elements of a guy that, or a kid really in this instance of the film, that really just wants to do something that he loves, but he just doesn't have the opportunity, either because of the circumstances that his family is in or whatever it might be. And he just kept pushing through and found a way to become a professional athlete in racing. And so really good stuff from the story. Let's dive into some of my pros about Gran Turismo. First pro that I have is the camera angles. That's one of the things that I mentioned on the first segment of the questions that I had. I really enjoyed what they were able to add, especially when there was scenes about race days, right? When there was actually races going on and they would highlight what Jann had to do in a specific instance of a race. And I thought it was just well done. They had some drones that would fly through the various tracks as they were driving, and you could see the cars racing by. I thought that was super unique. I mean, we've seen camera drone shots before, but I don't think we've seen it in that kind of a way for an actual racing movie. So I thought that was really well done. Different elements that they've able to incorporate for those camera shots was, again, a good twist. And again, just something unique. Now that we have better cameras and better technology, again, they were trying to at least able to use some of these features a little bit better for these camera shots. And again, thought it was just something different. Having these drones race around and kind of see where Jann or any of the other racers were added a nice little touch as you were watching the movie and the races. Second pro I had was I really enjoyed the elements that they incorporated that I feel like were from the game of Gran Turismo. Now, I need to make it very clear. I have not played any of the Gran Turismo games, but there was certain parts where when Jann would customize his car, you could see, on the screen, you could see him kind of scrolling through, and there's different types of engine parts, different types of wheels, different types of things that he can add, and that just looked like it came from a video game, right? There was other ones where anytime he was racing, on top of his car, they would pause and then they would show what place he was in. Again, different elements that they were able to add that seemed like they were from the Gran Turismo game. I'm pretty sure if you guys have played the games, you guys can tell me down below in the comments if I'm way off. Just let me know. Again, I've never played the games, but it feels like there were some video game elements that they added to it. And again, that's the uniqueness that I was looking for. Don't try to just make it very similar to other racing movies. Just try to be, your own instance of a new kind of film in this genre. Another thing that they also added was these different types of lines that some of the racing cars would have. And what I mean by that is there was an actual line on the racetrack that, again, simulated what a video game would have. Like, hey, here's the path that you should take if you want to optimize your performance on the racetrack. And Jann would see that, again, himself in his own view. And again, it just seemed like another element of the video game where it kind of highlights, hey, here's the fastest route, but if you want to take your own other route, follow this line. And so, again, a lot of good stuff, and I actually enjoyed that because, again, it made it unique and it added a visual to, make the race a little bit more interesting. Final pro for me in this film was the emotional stakes that were input into this movie. It has this underdog type of feeling, almost like a Rocky type of a feeling, right? They have Jann, who, again, in this story is trying to basically make a name for himself by showing the world that, hey, just because I played this Gran Turismo game on the PlayStation, just because I never actually drove a real car before, doesn't mean that I can't become a great driver. And they highlighted that. They highlighted relationships with his father. They highlighted different types of trauma of what would happen if he were to have an accident on the racetrack. There was just a lot of great emotion that was involved throughout the film that, again, it just made it a lot more of an enjoyable experience. Sometimes when films kind of just focus too much on just one specific aspect, they kind of ignore or forget about, well, what about this relationship here? Or what about this, relationship with this friend? And it kind of just gets kind of glossed over. So a lot of good stuff. Again, a lot of great emotion that again, I felt was definitely a good idea to add into it. Because again, it didn't just focus on him racing and racing and racing. It dealt with what he was, going through outside of the track as well. Okay, now I'm going to move over to some of the cons that I had about the movie. Let's start with some of the ways that the scenes were cut. At times, I felt like the first hour of the movie was rushing really, really fast. There's a part where he's in the Gran Turismo Academy. He gets invited, and he ends up participating and getting to know other folks that were actually, trying to compete for that same position as well. In this academy, only one person was going to win and actually become a race car driver to be sponsored by Nissan. I really was hoping to kind of see how they would build some of the relationships with Jann and some of the other contestants. Instead, they kind of glossed over it really quickly. You see him kind of interact with 2 or 3 other contestants, and that's about it. It kind of felt very rushed, and then boom, he immediately is the winner of the academy, and he moves on to now kind of start racing for Nissan and competing against other actual professional race car drivers. I would have really appreciated them kind of showing off more of like, who are these other contestants, what are their backgrounds, and then interacting with Jann a little bit more, because at the end of the film, he actually has to team up with some of his former competitors. And I feel like it would have hit a lot better if they would have had a better relationship early on, right? That way, it would have made you feel like, oh man, like that's so cool. He ended up facing against his rival in the competition. He beat him, but now he's come back to actually race on the same team. Wish they could have shown a little bit more of that relationship building in the academy, but again, just a little nitpick on my side of it as well. Second con that I really had that kind of confused me was there was a scene, and spoiler warning for anybody that has not seen Gran Turismo, there's a specific scene where Jann Mardenborough has an accident on the racetrack. He ends up flipping, crashing. It was a scary scene because it looks, you're in the cockpit of that car and you're just kind of rumbling through the entire kind of, racetrack as he crashes through a specific fence. He ends up going to the hospital, but the crazy fact of it is that he didn't give his parents a call. His parents were worried as all hell, and he didn't even give them the courtesy of giving them a call. He didn't even let them know where he was, what hospital. And I just thought that was like, what? It was like, I mean, he's a young kid. I understand that young kids make dumb decisions, but come on. If I was a parent, I would have gone crazy. I would have gone to the end of the earth to find my son after an accident like that. You want to make sure that he's okay. Is he still alive? What the heck happened? They kind of glossed over that piece of it. I was kind of confused, like, hold on. His parents are just okay with him. Like, they didn't even visit him at the hospital. They didn't even go visit him here. Like, what is going on? Again, that's just a little nitpick I got on my side. Maybe it didn't bother people when they watched it on their specific screening of it, but they should have given some more type of emotion to that piece of it, right? Like, have his parents actually fly out and show that, hey, he is serious about this race car thing, but again, he's okay, and then kind of have their support to get back into driving, right? Because that obviously can cause a lot of trauma. But just a little nitpick on my side of that piece of the film. Overall, Gran Turismo was a good movie that I got to watch in the movie theaters. Again, it's a good story overall, and it's just, again, it's wild to believe that this is a true story for Jann Mardenborough. How he was, again, able to go through, all the craziness of winning an academy and actually getting to race with professional athletes and eventually, again, becoming actually good at it as well. Nothing too crazy happened in regards to, like, the entire film overall. Like, nothing unique that made it, like, spectacular. But overall, again, it was better than what I expected. Now, is it something that you need to watch in theaters as of this moment? I would say no, not really. But once it's made available for streaming, and if you're very interested in kind of, race cars and driving, definitely go ahead and check it out as well. But again, not a full recommendation to go watch it in theaters. All right, now that we've kind of covered my overall thoughts, pros and cons, I think this would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about my favorite performance. This one's super easy. I try not to talk too much about it in the overall details because I feel like I would have spoiled it, but my favorite character was Jack Salter. Jack Salter was played by David Harbour. He was basically my biggest interest that I had in the film. I mean, his character was hilarious. His character was, serious. He was mean. He had to wear so many different hats in the film. He was a mentor to Jann. He was a friend. He was a retired veteran of the race world. He had to basically show Jann the ropes in order to keep him safe in every race that he participated in. But he was also against Jann competing against professionals because he thought the idea of a sim driver competing was ridiculous. But he just did a lot in this film. And he just stole the show for me. He also provided a lot of the comic relief of the movie. And it was just hilarious, and the way he would interact with, again, the antagonist, the protagonist, other supporting characters. It's just, again, you got to know more about him and why he would do the things that he did, but also understand how hard it was for him to leave the racing world. So really great stuff from David Harbour. Again, he's the sole reason why I enjoyed this movie so much. Probably gave it a little bit of a higher rating than maybe other people. But again, he stole the show for me. He deserves the best performance for Gran Turismo. All right, now let's go ahead and move into my favorite scene or moment of the film. Spoiler warning for anybody that has not seen the movie yet. Feel free to step away. That way you can, again, not get spoiled. Go watch the movie, then come back and then hear my thoughts about my favorite scene as well. And let me know down below if you agree or disagree. Okay, hopefully that's enough time, but my favorite scene is after Jann gets into an accident at one of the races. He's basically in the hospital, he's traumatized, and what's worse is that in the accident, he actually ended up crashing into a civilian, and the civilian actually died. And so Jann is in disbelief. He basically is now contemplating whether he wants to race at all anymore. And so what David Harbour, playing Jack Salter, does is basically takes him out for a drive to the course, and he actually takes him back to where the crash happened. And he basically puts him right there in that position, and he forces him to kind of look at that crash. And then he starts explaining that Jack went through that same thing in his career. He ended up crashing, and he ended up killing another driver as well. And because of that, Jack was filled with so much fear and guilt that he ended up quitting racing altogether. And that since he's been basically mentoring Jann and getting to know him more and getting to know that Jann is fully committed and wants this more than anything, and now that he's seen him go through an accident, the last thing he wants to do is let Jann quit and basically run away from what he's basically dreamed of as a kid. And so he forces him to get back on the car, and he basically tells him, finish your lap. Because of your crash, you didn't get to finish the lap. So now I'm forcing you to actually get back into the, in front of the wheel and drive. And he does just that. He drives slow, and then he starts picking it up and picking it up and picking it up. And then again, that just basically gets Jann out of his funk and that fear of what he went through. Really good stuff. And it's a good representation of what happens when we're like scared of a specific situation. That same fear can keep us from becoming great. And it's good that, again, in this story, Jann had David Harbour's Jack Salter to help him out. But again, really good stuff. And it kind of just goes to show you that, a lot of us might be in very similar situations. Granted, not a lot of us are going to be racing cars and crashing, but we might have other obstacles in our lives. And all we need to do is basically push through. Yes, it is scary. Yes, it is hard, but we got to do it because maybe there might be something great on the other side. All right, everybody. Now that we've kind of gone through all these segments, we have one more question to go through, and that is, does this movie have the potential to be timeless? At the moment, Gran Turismo is not a timeless movie for me. Although it does have some good emotional moments and a good interactions between the characters, David Harbour as Jake Salter is basically the reason why I enjoy this movie so much. But other than that, it doesn't have anything else that kind of stands out, and compared to other racing movies. Now, have I seen all great racing movies? No, I know that. But if I had to choose, again, Ford versus Ferrari is just an amazing movie because of the great moments, the great acting of Matt Damon and Christian Bale, and you also have, again, different types of emotions and things that are going on within this story. It's just a lot more engaging. I can see Gran Turismo was trying to pay homage to other films in that nature, especially for Ford versus Ferrari, which I kind of found very odd. Like there was, certain, things that were very similar. Ford versus Ferrari and Gran Turismo both had the same race, the Le Mans 24 hours race. You can even see that there was like a shot that kind of mimicked Ford versus Ferrari, where you have Jake Salter kind of looking at Jann Mardenborough and kind of just giving him a head nod. Very similar to what happens in Ford versus Ferrari. So again, I don't know if that was like paying homage to it, or they did it on purpose, or they didn't do it on purpose at all. But from the perspective of a timeless movie, there's just nothing that kind of makes me gives me goosebumps or makes me want to oh yeah, I can't wait to rewatch this race again. Again, I just didn't have those feelings after I watched the movie. That's not to say that every film needs to make me feel that way. Again, that's not the case. But there's just, again, I always kind of look for these memorable things that be like, I can't wait to put this on and rewatch it. Overall, this film did its job. It presented a true story about a kid who, again, did not give up on his dreams of wanting to become a race car driver and showing all the hurdles that he had to go through in order to get to where he wanted to be. Yes, there are a few cons and a few things that, again, I nitpicked on, but I still enjoyed my time watching it at the theaters. Guys, those are my thoughts on Gran Turismo. What are your guys' thoughts in regards to this movie? Have you gotten a chance to go see it? And if you have, well, let me know down below. Is this a timeless movie for you? Did you actually enjoy some of the racing scenes? And what were your favorite moments of the film? Let me know down below in the comments. That way we can kind of interact and compare what we thought about the film as well. Okay, guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 48 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new film and try to decide if it is timeless. All right, guys, thanks so much and have a great rest of your week.